Hey, look, we're back. You, me, we're on YouTube. Okay, it was weird, but I try things. What can I say? Today we are in our fourth session in our series about lines in our life. It's called Outside the Box, but Inside the Lines. The whole idea is that there's a way we can live life that we are not trapped by the opinions and people-pleasing and all those kinds of things that many people suffer from, but that we can establish lines in which our life can thrive, in which we can really follow God's will for ourselves without being manipulated by others. So today we're talking about laws and lines, and this is the first part. There are actually 10 laws that we'll cover. We'll cover 5 today and 5 in our next video. So, what is the point of talking about laws and lines? No one likes to talk about laws. We all like to break laws, but not talk about them. What if you are put in a new situation, one where you don't know the rules, so to speak? Don't you try and figure out what the rules are, who the key people are, those kinds of things? And when you do, don't you feel a lot more comfortable? Well, the world in which you and I live has rules, and they were established by God. And a lot of people try to ignore those rules, and when they do, they suffer the consequences for that. They're not experiencing the wrath of God or the judgment of God. When we do things that break God's established rules in relationships and life and finance, we experience the consequences for doing things that go against the principles God's established. We're not being judged, we're just experiencing consequences for our own poor decisions. So that's an important thing to remember. It also may be the reason why we experience a lot of relational problems, why we struggle and experience so much anxiety with people, why we have so many fears that they would abandon us, that they might not like us, that they might get angry with us, because we may be breaking the rules. So when it comes to the rules, we really should want to know the rules. We should really love the rules. This is what David said about it in Psalm 119. I have rejoiced in your laws as much as in riches. I will study your commandments and reflect on your ways. I will delight in your decrees and not forget your word. So let's start with the first rule we'll cover today, the law of sowing and reaping. Consider what Paul writes in Galatians. Don't be misled. No one makes a fool of God. What a person plants, he will harvest. You can't reject the law of sowing and reaping. We try to. We try to do things the same way over and over and over and over and expect different results, but it never works out for us. We find ourselves in terrible life patterns, and yet we can't change, or we refuse to change. Well, the law of sowing and reaping is why that's so. God established life in such a way that what you do in life has consequences or rewards. Now, that can be frightening in some ways, especially when you consider our own personal responsibility to live well. But it can also be a powerful reality. A lot of times there are people in our lives who are using us and manipulating us, and the reason they're there is because we are absorbing their consequences. And we need to realize that what we need to do is step out and stop interfering with the law of sowing and reaping. And so maybe you have a child who overspends money and you keep rescuing them. Well, they need to realize that there are consequences in life. There could be a lot of reasons. You may have a coworker that is always late and you cover for them. Well, you're absorbing their consequences. So a lot of times, one of the easiest ways to really begin to improve our own lines in life is to just stop absorbing other people's consequences and be responsible for ourselves. Which leads us to the next law, which is the law of responsibility. For you've been called to live in freedom, my brothers and sisters. But don't use your freedom to satisfy your sinful nature. Instead, use your freedom to serve one another in love. You know, we are called to love one another, and that's important. But we're not called to be one another. And that's really important. Because we have a responsibility to each other, to help each other with the crushing burdens in life. But we don't have a responsibility for each other. Each of us has to carry our own load, according to Galatians chapter 6. We need to remember that we are each responsible for ourselves. I'm responsible for me, and you're responsible for you. I don't know about you, but a lot of times I'm really fast with a yes. And it's because I want people to like me, to not leave me, to not be angry with me, what have you. It's a weakness that many of you understand. Well, now we need to realize that we need to stop popping off with the yes, and we need to back up and start taking time to think, well, what's me and what's you? What's my responsibility and what's your responsibility? By saying yes to you, what am I saying no to me about in my own life, in regard to my own family, my own spiritual growth, those kinds of things? And if you're ever in a situation where someone is pressing you for an immediate yes, you can pretty much count it down that you're being manipulated in that moment. And when someone's manipulating you, that's crossing the line. That's not okay. So it's totally fine to delay. So we have the law of sowing and reaping, the law of responsibility. Now let's talk about the law of power. You see, a lot of times we think we have power to do things that we don't actually have the power to do. A lot of times we're trying to control our lives. I put it this way, we're trying to control our lives from the outside in rather than from the inside out. What that means is, if I can just get this person to do that, I'll be happy. If I can just get my kids to do this, I'll be happy. If everyone can come home for this holiday, then everything will be great. What you're trying to do is you're trying to control things outside of you to bring things close to you. That's not a power you actually possess, and we need to keep that in mind. What do we have the power to do? My grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I'm glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me. What we have the power to do is to surrender to God, to surrender to truth, to discover our weaknesses and submit them to God, and in doing so, find strength to change our life. That strength comes from outside of us, and God pours it into us. What I'm trying to say is, your only power you have is by God's hand to change you. And when you change you, that exponentially increases your ability to influence other people, not control them, but influence them. So we need to get a good understanding of the concept of power and what power we actually have. Then we need to move into the law of respect. We're all pretty familiar with Matthew's statement, Matthew 7, that we shouldn't judge one another. And we're pretty familiar with the golden rule, so to speak. I'll read it. Do to others whatever you would like them to do to you. This is the essence of all that is taught in the law and the prophets. You see, when you begin to draw lines in life, you want people to respect your boundaries. You want people to respect the fact that you said no because you're saying yes to something else that's more important to you. Now, if you're going to do that, you have to respect other people as well. There's a principle that comes into play in the law of respect that if I give others respect, they will reciprocate that respect will come back to me. Maybe not always, but more often than it has in the past. And if I disrespect others, then guess what's going to come back to me? Disrespect. So it's very important that I not judge people. I not say to someone who says to me no when I've requested something from them, hey, you could do it. Your life isn't as hard as mine, and judge them in some kind of way. That's not good, not healthy. Law of respect. I give respect and I receive respect. And the fifth law we're going to cover today is the law of motivation. And this is very important because it kind of founds the whole purpose for boundaries. Why have boundaries? Just so I can do better self-care? No, that's not the reason. The reason for lines in our life is so we can love people better, and we can actually serve people out of love rather than resentment. Consider what Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians. If I give everything I have to the poor and even sacrifice my body, I could boast about it, but if I didn't love others, I would have gained nothing. Oh my goodness, nothing is what Paul's answer to that is. Everything we do has to come out of love. So here's what I'd like you to consider. An honest no is far better than a resentment-filled yes. We need to remember that when I say yes to someone and then I do it grudgingly or with resentment, I'm harming the relationship. I'm accomplishing nothing that's truly good for them. Sure, I may be protecting myself from their anger or abandonment, but I'm not loving them. And if it's not love, Paul says it doesn't count and it doesn't help. Real love isn't filled with resentment. It's filled with joy and peace, and it really helps people. So as you think about these first 5 laws, we'll cover 5 more next week. Just ask yourself, and this is a hard question, am I breaking the laws? Am I living in consequences rather than in rewards? And what can I do to move back into the law of sowing and reaping and live according to it, to live in the law of respect and of motivation? think about it. Talk to someone about it. Have a real discussion about what you have learned today and how you could help someone else with this. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.